This hour on i24 News, Iran's supreme leader says his country is ready to abandon the nuclear deal and restart its nuclear activities. And he says Iran will not negotiate with the United States.
These people are indecent, confrontational, vulgar people. What negotiations? Not the president, not the foreign minister, or anyone in the foreign ministry should talk to the Americans. It's meaningless.
And the Trump administration will reportedly cut all aid to the UN agency that helps Palestinian refugees, but some Israeli defense officials worry that will only embolden extremists.
And at the Vatican, amidst allegations he covered up sex abuse accusations in Ireland and the United States, Pope Francis is lamenting how church officials failed to respond.
I asked forgiveness to the Lord for these sins, for the scandal, and the sense of betrayal procured.
And the White House lawyer who cooperated with the special counsel's Russia investigation is leaving the White House.
From the i24 News studios in Times Square in New York, this is Crossroads with David Schuster and Shayna Estulin.
4 months after President Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, now appears ready to restart his country's nuclear program.
Khamenei said his country needs to stop hoping Europe can offer Iran the kind of economic incentives that would keep Iran in compliance. Here he is.
Some are talking about negotiations with America, but that is definitely not going to happen. This is meaningless. Those who were at least saving face in the Obama administration acted like that. These people are indecent, confrontational, vulgar people. What negotiation? Not the president, not the foreign minister, or anyone in the foreign ministry should talk to the Americans. It's meaningless. I have said before, and I say again, we should keep our relations with European countries, but you should give up hope on them. We cannot be hopeful on European help on any issue, including the nuclear deal or economic affairs. That would not do anything.
This doesn't seem to come as any surprise to people who were critical of President Trump pulling out of the Iran deal. What they said was hardliners will say to the moderates like Rouhani, you made a mistake by making a deal with the United States, and now we're going to get tougher.
Yeah, and it does seem that a lot of people may pay attention to the language, calling the Trump administration officials confrontational, vulgar, indecent. This does seem like the last effort by Iran, whether at the supreme leader level or the political level, to say to Europeans, okay, this is it. We're going to restart our nuclear program unless you come up with something better than you've offered so far. This is essentially the last warning before we restart the program.
But it's been 4 months.
Yeah.
I don't know how long they have.
I mean, there have been negotiations, and some European leaders seem to have negotiated in good faith, but they're simply not able to provide the kind of economic benefits to Iran that would make up for the U.S. sanctions that have been reimposed. Iran seems to know that and realizes it's not getting the sort of thing that's going to turn around its cratering economy. So now it's a question of, okay, can we get perhaps a little more in exchange for us holding off on restarting our fissile material and our research and et cetera?
But then does Iran really restart their nuclear program? I think that's a question, too. Do they really want to go down that road?
That's a huge gamble. Meanwhile, Iran may be forced to deal with Russia for influence in Syria now that the civil war in Syria appears to be winding down.
Both Iran and Russia supported President Assad's regime in Syria, but ambitions there are shifting. Our senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev takes a closer look.
With the civil war in Syria approaching its probable end and the Assad regime taking control of most of the Syrian territory, what is next for the country and the region? With the main issue for Israel, the Iranian presence in Syria and the challenges it poses. Israeli officials now believe that due to the close coordination between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Russian President Vladimir Putin, Russia will keep Iran and its proxies away from the Israeli border on the Golan Heights. These were the ground forces that took over the rebel strongholds after they were pounded by the Russian and Syrian air forces, and with Moscow recognizing the beginning of a new phase, pressure was put on Tehran to withdraw its ground forces further back. Is this good news for Israel? Not necessarily. One of Iran's goals is to be a threat to Israel from Syrian territory. That can be achieved by the highly sophisticated weapon system placed deep in Syrian territory, far from the Israeli border, but close enough to give the Israeli leadership a major headache. If Israel hopes to see no Iranian forces anywhere in Syria, it will have to take action and probably do it by force. Jonathan Regev, i24 News.
To discuss all of these things related to Iran, let's bring in Iman Foroutan, a chairman and executive director of the new Iran, the Yeah, the new Iran is the name of the organization. And Dr. Foroutan, first of all, what do you make of the comments by Khamenei on this day to essentially warn the United States that there will be no negotiations and also to warn his own president, Rouhani, don't trust the Europeans?
Thank you for having me on your program, David. Well, this was all expected. This is basically what Khamenei said today is something that we had expected for a long time, and we have been telling our audiences inside Iran as we do our satellite television broadcasts into Iran. This means that even Europeans do not wish to follow up with their P5+1 agreement. If you recall, a couple of days ago, President Macron of France actually canceled the meeting when he found out that Iran Islamic Republic had funded and had a plot with his diplomats in Belgium to go and bomb a gathering of Iranian opposition in France. And monetarily doesn't make sense. Companies like General Electric, Total, Siemens, Boeing, they've all pulled out from any investments in Iran, and this is further triangulation of Islamic Republic economically. And this is only after 2 weeks that the first phase of sanctions has happened. The economic situation was much worse before, and it's going to get even worse after November once the second phase of the sanctions are applied to Islamic Republic.
Can you play the tape forward for us? And this is something we discussed here before we brought you on, but if the nuclear deal fails, does Iran then restart the nuclear program? Is that what you see happening?
Well, let's talk about what part of nuclear program. To have a nuclear bomb, there's 3 components to it. You know, it's the enrichment, it's actually having missiles to deliver it, and it's also the warhead to trigger the nuclear bomb. The nuclear deal only talked about enrichment, limiting the enrichment from 20% uranium. Iran, Islamic Republic, has been continuing their missile tests, and they have been working on their warheads. So whether they continue or not really does not matter because they know what the consequences will be, and that's something that every country in the world, including Russia, Islamic Republic's biggest ally, they oppose. And that's assuming Islamic Republic has any money to put into those research. So I think it's all a bluff, and it's a last-minute bluff in order to stay in power a little bit longer and see what they can get from the Western countries as far as financial help goes.
So it's your estimation, it's your prediction, therefore, that yes, they'll continue to work on their missiles and also the warhead technology, but that they will not actually restart the enrichment side of their nuclear program.
Well, the enrichment is the only component of the nuclear deal with the U.S. and the P5+1. So Iran is now threatening to start enrichment. And they can do that. We already know they may already be doing that because nobody can get into the Natanz area where they're doing a lot of these tests. So I'm sure the Atomic Energy Agency and the Western countries will be very much focusing and trying to learn what Iran is up to and stop it.
But it's not the only card they have. They can also attack Israel through their proxies. They seem to be wanting to stay in Syria for a very long time. Then you have the Strait of Hormuz, which they're threatening to shut down, which could disrupt oil supplies. So if the nuclear deal fails, maybe they won't restart their nuclear program, but they could cause a lot of damage.
Which is nothing new. They've been causing trouble for the last 40 years. The fact that Islamic Republic went ahead and supposedly signed a separate agreement with Syria a couple days ago to stay there longer, that shows the new divide between Islamic Republic and Russia. 2 months ago, a representative of Khamenei traveled to Moscow, talked to Putin, came back to Iran and said, well, we may not want to stay in Syria for so long. President Trump has already announced that no way they're going to allow Iranian troops in Syria. Russia has already told them so. That's the last stronghold of Islamic Republic to support Hezbollah and all the terrorist activities against Israel. So even at this time, Russia will not allow them to do so. And who knows what may happen soon as far as attacks against the Islamic Republic forces and Quds forces inside Syria.
Perhaps, although it's still not clear if the U.S. has any leverage to actually force Iran out. But Dr. Iman Foroutan, we thank you for coming on our show this evening and giving us your analysis.
You know, the one thing we didn't
Thank you
talk
for
about,
having me.
and that is the public protests that continue in Iran. And you get the sense that the Iranian government is increasingly, the Iranian regime is increasingly worried and concerned about where the public protests are going and the economic anxieties that so many people are feeling. And maybe this is not the time, therefore, where they invite perhaps either military action from the United States or Israel, perhaps even stronger sanctions because of what they may do either with the nuclear program or possibly in Syria.
And that's a rational way of looking at how they may behave, but the government there is split, again, amongst hardliners, the Revolutionary Guards, the moderates. Everybody has their own priorities here, so they may not all do the rational thing.
Yeah.